Over to you, Megan.
Good morning. Can folks hear me? Yeah. Awesome. Well, I hope everyone is sufficiently caffeinated and ready for this conversation. I get the great honor of kicking off our public programming for the day, so thank you all for being here. The session title is The AI Dilemma, Governing for a Digital Future. And I think we're at a really pivotal moment in society as progressives, and really at the intersection of democracy and a choice on choosing democracy going forward for our future, and the advent of technology, particularly with the way generative AI and AI has really come onto the scene and blown up in a very big way. And so today I'm honored to be guiding this conversation. I'm surrounded on all sides by the real experts who I'll introduce in a minute. But the big question we're really seeking to answer here is, how do we govern AI as progressives in a way that protects people, strengthens the economy, and simultaneously prevents and mitigates the far-right authoritarian regime and the risks to the way we really see AI thriving in the future, and how to manage those risks and also simultaneously manage the opportunities, of which there are many. So with that, I will introduce our panelists, and we'll get things started. So to my right, we have MEP Alexandra Giza, hailing from Germany. Ms. Giza is a leading digital policymaker within the European Greens, who played a key role in developing the EU's Digital Services Act, or DSA. She sits on the Industry, Budget, Internal Market, and Women's Rights Committees in the European Parliament, and is a prominent voice on international and social issues. To her right is Farida Bedwi. Ms. Bedwi is a leading tech entrepreneur who co-founded Logicel Limited and pioneered the development of GKudi, a cloud-based banking platform now widely used by microfinance institutions across Ghana. She's on the board of Ghana's National Communications Authority, previously worked as a principal software engineer at Microsoft, and is currently a platform product consultant at Digital Opportunity Trust, where she's part of the team building and managing digital systems that support innovation and youth engagement across Africa. To my left, we have Enma Lopez. Ms. Lopez is the Spanish Federal Secretary for Economic and Digital Transformation and deputy spokesperson of the Spanish Socialist Workers' Party. She's advised successive prime ministers and has been central to setting the country's strategy on economic, industrial, and digital issues. And lastly, on the far left for me is Tim Wu. Tim is a professor at Columbia Law School, the former special assistant to President Biden for technology and competition policy in the Biden-Harris administration, and now visiting at Oxford. He coined the phrase net neutrality in 2003 in the White House and was hailed as the architect of the administration's anti-monopoly agenda. Lastly, he authored the forthcoming book, The Age of Extraction: How Tech Platforms Conquered the Economy and Threaten Our Future Prosperity. So with that, quite the bios. We'll dive right in, wasting no time. So I will open with a high-level question that I would love all our panelists to really start with. Enma, we'll start over with you. What is the biggest challenge that progressives, folks in the room and out of the room, face in governing AI? And how do we tackle that challenge in a way that not just doesn't just consider policymakers, but also considers people?
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for giving us this amazing opportunity to talk about probably one of the key topics of these times. From my perspective, the big deal is not falling into the false dilemma between advancing and regulating. They are not opposite, and in our perspective, they must be together. Why so? Because if we have rules in the real life, why don't we have that in the digital life? Do we really want the digital life to become some kind of the Far West? We don't. But actually, we cannot deny the advance. We need to embrace it. And to embrace it, we have also to create public policies that doesn't leave anyone behind. That has been on the mind of the Spanish government during all those years. For us, it's very important not only to create the material conditions for AI to develop, for instance, 5G in almost the full territory of Spain, but also this high-speed velocity broadband. It's right now in the 95% of our territory, but also giving grants to all these small companies. The 95% of our companies are really, really small. We call it pymes. And giving them the opportunity to also embrace that technology. And also we're talking about rights. We have passed this digital act with rights, and not only we've created an agency to protect and to preserve all those rights. We are talking about digital disconnection, we are talking about neutrality, we are talking about things that in real life are so clear, but they must be also in the digital life. So as a sum up, that could be that we need to embrace it, we need to regulate it, and we need to advance in that sovereignty, not only in language, that of course is important, but also in terms of chips, in terms of semiconductors, in terms of all these algorithms and the data that is going to rule the next years of our lives.
Thank you. Tim, we'll turn to you.
Sure, thank you. It's great to be here. I think this conference has been great and very inspirational and motivating, so thank you again for having me on this panel and being here in general. I think the rise of artificial intelligence does pose significant challenges for the progressive movement, and I'll say why. I think it's very important for progressives that we remain a movement that is serious about the future, serious about growth, optimism, building an economy, and no one wants to be in the country that's left behind.
Exactly.
On the other hand, I think we do have to learn from some of the lessons of the last revolution, of the internet revolution itself. The promise in that time, thinking back to the 90s and the early thousands, is that the internet was going to make everybody rich. It was very simple. Didn't matter where you go. Geography was no longer going to matter. Doesn't matter where you were, everybody was going to make it. Because you could work from home, you could invent an app, you could do this, you could do that, you could do this. 30 years later, we look back, and in fact, there was an acceleration of the process of winner regions and loser regions that was accelerated by the internet. And when you think about it, what happened was that mainly the returns went to the platforms, mainly in the United States, mainly on the coasts. And the rest of the world, and where I live or lived in most of the United States, got a lot of great stuff, was able to buy things quickly and so forth, but didn't reap the same kind of returns. And so I think as the AI revolution goes forward, I think we have to have that example in mind. And we have to think about a kind of building that builds the entire economy, not at the expense of parts of the economy. Frankly, I think voters are attuned to this. I mean, voters are more skeptical of AI than they are of the internet. People are just actively worried about having their jobs replaced. So I think thinking through the economics is really important. I don't think we should want our countries or our regions to become satellites of Silicon Valley, economic satellites of Silicon Valley, nor do I think you want a situation where that you're competing with tax breaks or whatever you can to try to beg for little crumbs of investment. I think if you want a tech industry, you need to have a tech industry. I think if you want to have AI, you have to have AI. But depending on this model, of hoping to lure a little bit of investment is, I think, a risky proposition if you look at the history of the internet in the last 30 years.
Thank you, Tim. Alexander, we'll turn to you.
Well, I think what we have tried to do is look at AI as a technology. And what AI is today is a power structure. It's an enormous power structure. Just let me give you two examples. I think the first one is the monopoly on information that large language models now have. If we increasingly use those large language models to produce text, that text goes to the internet. This is what AI models are trained on. You see how big the influence is. And we're already seeing that, for example, NewsGuard showed that there was a Russian disinformation campaign that produced text just to train AI models, and 30% of that material spreading disinformation about the war against Ukraine in Russian and Ukrainian language ended up in those large language models, in those AI chatbots. There are other examples from Elon Musk even being proud of saying, well, we tweak the algorithm, we change the output of Grok. So if you control the global knowledge production, this is pure power. And we see in the US the attack on universities, the attack on teachers, the attack on education in general. This is a global effort to reduce knowledge, to reduce the access to objective knowledge, and to control the knowledge production. The second point is that AI is an infrastructure. It's about data centers, it's about satellite, it's about undersea cables. Where does this information travel? It's about having your products and services used by basically every European company. I speak for the European Union here as a European Parliament lawmaker. So that gives you a power to blackmail people. Very simply. And now we see many of these companies teaming up with President Trump as basically their first lobbyist, who is asking the European Union very, very actively and threatening us with visa restriction, threatening us with sanctions, threatening us with tariffs, that we make a big exception for US companies that don't have to abide by our laws. So this is attacking sovereignty as such. This is taking away the sovereignty from the people. If we believe in our democracy, the sovereignty lies with the people. And what some of these tech companies, together with the Trump administration, are saying, no, we decide what you can do. We decide your regulation. We decide your legislation. We decide whether you can or cannot protect your people. And that is totally unacceptable. And the third point is, where does the added value go? It's the value extraction. I hope Tim will elaborate on that a little. Because the big promise is an increase in productivity. But where exactly is that increase in productivity? Is that really in the industrial production? Or is it more the possibility to have less workers you need to pay? In that case, those workers were paying taxes. Now they might need social services. So where does the added value go? Does it stay in Europe? Does it stay in the place where you employ the AI tool or the infrastructure? Or does it go to a different country and is not contributing to the welfare of the people living in that country? That are the big questions. On the other hand, what is the solution? I think it is actively engaging in that space. I'm not only a lawmaker, I'm also a founder of the Eurostack initiative. That is a movement together with the industry to build a European digital infrastructure. And this is not about creating a wall around Europe. It's about breaking up those walled gardens, breaking up those monopolies, creating open standards, using open source software, creating a network of companies producing AI technologies, AI tools, and everything that goes with it, the infrastructure that goes with it, not only in Europe, but also all over the world by companies and jurisdictions that do not want to accept that power structure, but that want to keep that technology open and servicing the people and not just a few billionaires.
Thank you. Farida?
Okay. So for me, the whole of yesterday and the sessions, I felt very excluded because Africa wasn't mentioned at all in the conversation. And our problems, I mean, obviously, things are a bit different for us, but we still have similar issues, especially when it comes to things like unconscious bias and all those things, when it comes to AI. Because, for instance, if you are looking at doing agentic AI, where we are setting up a health monitoring system, which would make recommendations on things like maternal health issues. Most of the data is coming from the West, most of the data being trained is coming from the West. It's not coming from Africa. So obviously the parameters and things will be different. So a couple of weeks ago, I was actually talking about why Africa needs to get more involved in the conversation. Because if not, what's going to happen is that things that will work for people in the West would be implemented for us, and it will not work because our parameters are different. And our social constructs, our cultural constructs will not come into play in the whole conversation. So it's very important that in Africa, we also look at how can we contribute to this whole AI conversation. We are the second biggest planet, we are the second biggest continent in the world. We have the largest population of youth. So it's very important that we also play a major part in this whole thing. And when we have similar problems when it comes to elections and misinformation and all those things, though not at the same scale as in the US or Europe, but we still have it. So, I mean, it's very important that we also get involved in the learning, in training the learning models and making sure that our data is represented within the learning models as well.
Thank you. So, as we're in the UK and have two Europeans on the panel, I'd love to turn to them to maybe answer a two-parter. That tension between regulating and innovation. We talk extensively about it in the United States. It's part of the reason that the right defends the lack of regulation for technology and that they believe it will stifle innovation and that it is a zero-sum black and white game. And we've seen cases in Europe that really prove that otherwise. And we have two experts here who have worked directly on various pieces of regulation in Europe. And so maybe we'll start with you, Alexandra. How did you approach the DSA and the AI Act when it comes to the right protections, but also not stifling innovation, or really responding to that argument that you're trading off against innovation in order to protect? And how do you respond to that with other members in Parliament and the kind of folks in the room? And then, Enma, you talked about this in your opening, but how do you think about that as far as when advising the Spanish leadership in navigating this issue?
Well, I contest that there's a trade-off between innovation and regulation. There's good regulation and there's bad regulation. And what we shouldn't do is bad regulation. I think that is the point. And just to make an example, I don't know if anybody has seen the Netflix series Dopesick. It's about the opioid crisis in the US, and there was this one scene where the Sackler family starts discussing, well, we should start doing this in Europe as well. We should get doctors to prescribe these opioids, highly addictive, one of the big causes of the opioid crisis. And then after like a minute, they rule it out because they realize that would never fly in Europe. It would just never work. Well, in the US, it was sufficient to buy the one single person signing off that from the FDA. This is why in the US, the number of drug-related deaths per 100,000 is 10 times higher than in Europe. It's because we have better regulation. So that's good regulation. I totally agree. In Europe, we have a lot of bad regulation. We have a lot of paperwork, and we should get rid of it. But let's look at what is good and what is bad. So what we did with the Digital Services Act, for example, we have different company sizes, basically. We look at how big is the company, is there a risk coming from that company? So for smaller and middle-sized companies, the obligations are very, very basic. And I really defy anybody to find a European company contesting the DSA on the basis that it's too much red tape. While we do have serious obligation for the very large online platforms, the ones with more than 45 million users in the European Union. That's like something like 20-25 companies. This is how you do good regulation. You look at what is really the risk and how can respond companies to that, and then you do targeted regulation really addressing that risk. This is how you need to do it.
Can I just add something?
Yes, please.
So when it comes to regulation, I'm a software engineer by profession, and you don't want to kill creativity. That is what regulation can do. It can kill creativity because then people will not be as innovative as they want to be, because they know that if something new is coming up, it could be subject to regulation, and it could be, the idea could be mixed from the beginning. So at the end of the day, there has to be a real balance, because the difference between the health industry and the technology industry is that in the health industry, you're just addressing one illness or one sickness or something. That is what you're solving. But with technology, the possibilities are endless. You don't know what can come out of anything. I mean, I can sit down to write something, then before I know it, I have come up with something that I didn't even think about. So if I have a regulatory body that is actually monitoring my work and telling me I can only do A and I cannot do B, then it would kill the creativity. So we have to strike a real balance, and I don't think we have been able to get it right up to now. That is why the social media platforms and things are largely unregulated, because where do you draw the line?
Thank you. Emma, turn it to you.
Regarding what we were saying in our yesterday's conversation, we have to link all this AI discussion with our will to protect our democracies. That's something that is super important. It's not only about individual rights that it is. It's also about how to keep safe our democracy. How can we prevent the attacks and intervention in our elections? How can we keep safe our people from all this deep fake news, where in the future, but it's not that far away, it's going to be super difficult to define what is real to what is not. So in that case, AI Act and all the legislation we've done in Spain, I think is crucial to protect what we have and stop being like, I don't know how to say it, like probably in a weak position. So there are some stats that says that in 2035, 58% of our jobs, of our employments, are going to be affected by AI. That's also an opportunity, because that could mean an increase of 8% on the GDP. That's really good. And it hasn't mean necessary to lose all that jobs, but only we are talking about improving the way that we work, like losing all these mechanical tasks that last us, and also a great opportunity to increase our productivity. For Spain, for the Spanish economy, for instance, that's a huge deal. But it needs, for instance, for trade unions, how to train all our people to embrace that technology without leaving it behind. It could be also a great opportunity to stop all this bureaucracy, to put together the administration and the citizens, because you have the opportunity to talk to the administration in your natural speaking, in your natural language. So you just talk with the machine and say, please, I need that. And it's going to be much easier and also quicker. So for that instance, that could be not only something that could be weak for democracy, but also a strengthen. And I think that's the point of view that we need to tackle, to embrace that opportunity and to avoid all the risks.
Tim, jumping off the economic incentives and impact on economy point, we talked a little bit yesterday about some of the kind of concentration of power and wealth beneficiaries being among the platforms and the LLM developers. Yeah. From your time in the Biden NEC and your forthcoming book, which we're all excited to read, how do you think about addressing those perverse incentives, right? We talked yesterday about how I spent time at the platforms, and they're set up in a way that will be able to change, really. And so how do you think about that, and what's your advice for this group as they navigate this?
Yeah, I think it dovetails with what was just spoken about as, this trade-off between growth and regulation. So I won't deny, I think it's fair to say that over-regulation can hurt growth. I don't want to lie about that. But there's a very big difference between that and making sure that the spoils of the wealth created are distributed more evenly than last time. What we let happen over the last 40 years is we allowed the tech platforms, which are undeniably convenient, essential, have become the platforms of our economy. We've let them become these extraction technologies that just take too much from the rest of the economy. And I think any mind towards AI policy has to, as you said, embrace technological advance as a means of generating wealth, but at the same time, make sure that we have a technology that is infrastructural, that is building for the whole economy. I think progressives need a build agenda, but it needs to be a build agenda that just doesn't say, oh, those guys, those 4 companies are going to build our future and take all the money. It has to be, how are these AI platforms, how is this kind of infrastructure, maybe like the railroads, maybe like electricity, going to support a lot of other economic activity? That is the kind of build agenda I think progressives can get behind. I think progressives need to harness the power of AI. I mean, this is an incredible time to build things. This is a period where there's all kinds of possibilities. We should, there is this opportunity for flourishing, for countries to build different kind of companies than ever before, kind of the original promise of the internet. And the question is the kind of policies government takes to allow the entire economy to build, as opposed to hoping a few companies are going to build the whole future for us and take all the money.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the themes that I think came through there and that has come up yesterday extensively is on messaging and how the left, I think, can candidly do better than we have been historically. Alexandra, what is your, we chatted in the working group yesterday, what is your advice or your thought on how we can really scale a smaller number of succinct messages across the progressive movement? How would you advise this group to do that effectively if you were given the chance, which you are in your position?
Well, to do that in a second. I think it's important to challenge that dominant narrative, like, for example, innovation versus regulation, and say innovation is what serves the people and the planet. That is, for example, I think a message we could all agree on in the progressive spectrum. And try to bring that message everywhere, and then have people, telling you what exactly does that mean. For me, it means, as a European lawmaker, it means we support European industry, we support European companies. I mean, we are supposed to be the progressives who don't necessarily accept the status quo. Who has said that 5 companies would control all this AI power structure? We can build something else. I mean, Taiwan has shown how to do that. India is showing how to do that. Why shouldn't we do that and support that effort as progressives to create a more distributed form of power where everybody can harness the potential of artificial intelligence, but we also have the democratic power as legislators to protect the people from the harms, and we're already seeing the harms. I think that is a common message. Artificial intelligence really needs to benefit the people. And in order to benefit the people, we need a lot of companies working on it in a very networked way. It needs to be open, it needs to be transparent, and let's do this together.
Thank you. Farida, you had really good points about bringing the Global South into the conversation more prominently. And that's something really a priority for global progress as well, in really uniting the perspectives on AI and on progressive issues more broadly. How can we, as progressives, do a better job of incorporating the importance and the feedback and the prominence of the rising Global South, and how technology impacts the Global South maybe in different ways than it does other countries? How can we do better at incorporating that perspective?
So I think we need to engage a lot more with African tech companies, as well as the governments. They are very important, because we don't We have a similar problem, as she just said, because of where the data is. Data is the most expensive commodity these days. I mean, if you have data, you have everything. Our data is being housed within these 5 big tech companies. We have no control over it. So I think I've been advocating for Africa to have its own data centers where we can have our data, where we can train our own data models, so that we will not be reliant on information from the US or wherever, because it's scary knowing that your whole infrastructure and everything is being housed in a country or in a region which if today they decide they are going to cut you off, you're screwed. So it's very important that you come and you listen to us. Because for too long, the West has been telling us what to do, instead of asking us, how do you want us to help you? The conversation has to change from do this to we are partners. How can we work together to make the world a better place?
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's time. So unfortunately, we have to wrap it. But a round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Well, our next session takes us to one of the defining challenges of our time. That's migration. The UN estimates that more than 120